By the spring of 1942, American fighter pilots were entering the skies over both Europe and the Pacific, often facing enemy aircraft with superior experience. The first encounters were harsh lessons in aerial warfare. Over Europe, young pilots flying P-40 Warhawks or early P-38 Lightnings were confronted by the Luftwaffe's seasoned aces, many of whom had fought in the Battle of France or the early Blitzkrieg campaigns. Despite initial losses, American pilots quickly adapted to the tactics of high-speed dogfights. They learned to use altitude advantage, energy retention, and teamwork to offset disadvantages in maneuverability and experience. In the Pacific, the situation was equally daunting. P-40s and F-4F Wildcats met the Japanese Mitsubishi A-6M0, a plane noted for its agility and climb rate. Early engagements revealed that American pilots could not match the enemy in turning combat, but they compensated with hit-and-run tactics, diving attacks, and disciplined gunnery. Lieutenant Edward "Ed" O'Hare, for example, became the first American ace in the Pacific by leveraging precise shooting and coordinated squadron tactics to destroy 5 enemy bombers in a single mission over the Pacific theater. These initial confrontations set the foundation for the evolution of American air combat strategy. Pilots began meticulously analyzing enemy maneuvers, refining their techniques for energy fights, deflection shooting, and formation flying. By learning from each encounter, they transformed from inexperienced flyers into aces capable of extraordinary feats. The psychological aspect was equally crucial. Facing opponents with greater combat hours demanded mental resilience. Aces like Robert S. Johnson and John C. Meyer would later stress that discipline, patience, and situational awareness were as decisive as firepower in survival and victory. This period also highlighted the importance of aircraft modification and squadron tactics. P-38 pilots in Europe quickly realized that paired flights could outmaneuver lone Luftwaffe fighters. In the Pacific, Wildcats used the Thatch Weave, a defensive maneuver devised by John Thatch, to counter the superior turning ability of Japanese planes. These early innovations, born out of necessity, would define the conduct of American aces for the remainder of the war. By the end of 1942, the United States Army Air Forces had established the basis for an aerial doctrine emphasizing altitude, speed, teamwork, and tactical ingenuity. What began as painful trial and error would evolve into a lethal advantage over both European and Pacific adversaries. American aces were no longer mere participants. They were beginning to dominate skies previously considered the domain of enemy experience. By mid-1943, American aces had begun to make a mark that would resonate across both theaters of war. Over Europe, pilots of the 8th Air Force were flying long-range missions deep into German territory in P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs. These aircraft, faster and better armed than early P-40s, allowed American pilots to engage Luftwaffe fighters on more equal terms. Pilots such as Richard Bong, who would become America's top ace, honed their skills through a combination of rigorous training and the brutal reality of combat. Dogfights were no longer simply about survival. They became contests of strategy, precision, and psychological endurance. In the Pacific, the legendary exploits of aces like Joe Foss and Pappy Boyington exemplified the unique challenges of island-hopping warfare. Air superiority in the Pacific required not only skill but also adaptability to unpredictable conditions. Sudden weather shifts, tropical storms, and the limited range of carriers meant that pilots often fought alone or in small formations far from support. Boyington, commanding the famed Black Sheep Squadron, developed tactics that relied on surprise attacks, energy management, and coordinated group maneuvers to overcome superior numbers. American aces began to establish reputations that were as much about innovation as about courage. Over Europe, Mustang pilots could escort bombers to Berlin and back, effectively transforming the strategic bombing campaign. Pilots learned to protect their charges from the Luftwaffe by anticipating enemy intercept patterns and using altitude, speed, and teamwork to maximize their effectiveness. Over the Pacific, the effectiveness of individual aces often dictated the survival of entire missions, as skilled pilots could shield less experienced comrades from ambushes. The importance of intelligence also grew. Mission planning relied on careful assessment of enemy positions, capabilities, and tactics. Photographic reconnaissance and radio intercepts enabled pilots to strike with precision. In some cases, a single ace could identify weaknesses in Japanese or German formations, exploiting them to devastating effect. These experiences demonstrated a crucial lesson. In aerial combat, the combination of skill, information, and technology often outweighed raw numerical superiority. By 1943, American aces were no longer reactive. They had become proactive hunters, controlling the skies and shaping the battlefield. Their growing confidence was matched by increasing technical advantages. Aircraft upgrades, such as improved armaments, armor, and fuel range, complemented the pilots' growing expertise. For many of these young men, each successful mission reinforced a pattern of decision-making that would define their legendary status. Patience, situational awareness, and the capacity to exploit both the environment and the enemy's mistakes. By late 1943, American aces were no longer just learning the battlefield, they were reshaping it. Over Europe, bomber escort missions provided the first proving ground for these pilots. The P-51 Mustang, with its long range and powerful armament, allowed American fighters to accompany B-17 and B-24 bombers deep into German airspace. During these missions, pilots like Chuck Yeager and Bud Anderson demonstrated not only their shooting skills but the ability to think tactically under extreme pressure. A single Mustang squadron could fend off multiple waves of experienced Luftwaffe fighters, often turning a desperate mission into a decisive victory. The Pacific theater posed an entirely different set of challenges. Here, individual initiative often determined survival. Aces like Richard, Dick, Bong, Thomas Maguire, and Joe Foss routinely flew solo or in pairs over enemy-held islands, engaging Japanese Zeros in dogfights that required split-second decisions. In one notable encounter over New Guinea, Bong achieved multiple kills in a single sortie, exploiting the superior diving speed of his P-38 Lightning to strike and retreat before the enemy could respond. Each of these engagements required a mastery of energy management, spatial awareness, and the ability to predict enemy behavior, skills honed in training but perfected in combat. American aces also pioneered tactical innovations. Boom and zoom tactics became standard. Dive from higher altitude, unleash firepower, then climb back before the enemy could counterattack. This approach minimized exposure to return fire and leveraged the superior power-to-weight ratio of American aircraft. In Europe, coordinated fighter sweep missions allowed small groups of Mustangs to establish air superiority ahead of bomber formations. These sweeps forced the Luftwaffe to engage on unfavorable terms, maximizing the American pilots' advantage. Intelligence again played a decisive role. Before each mission, pilots studied aerial reconnaissance photos, enemy base layouts, and flight paths. They memorized patterns in Luftwaffe rotations and Japanese patrols, learning when and where the enemy was most vulnerable. These insights allowed them to strike with precision, conserving fuel, ammunition, and lives. Over time, the combination of superior aircraft, rigorous planning, and pilot skill created a distinct psychological edge. Enemy pilots knew they were facing adversaries capable of executing attacks with speed, accuracy, and near-anticipatory awareness. By the end of 1943, several American aces had already secured legendary reputations. Richard Bong had achieved his first double-digit kill total in the Pacific, while Chuck Yeager and Bud Anderson were gaining fame over Europe. These victories did not come from raw numbers alone. They were the result of meticulous preparation, calculated risk-taking, and the ability to remain calm under life-threatening conditions. The achievements of these early aces laid the foundation for what would become a legacy of dominance in the skies, both over Europe and the Pacific. By early 1944, American aces were moving from individual heroics to coordinated air operations. The 8th Air Force over Europe had grown into a formidable machine, combining hundreds of bombers with escort fighters in complex formations. Aces like Robert S. Johnson, Gabby Gabreski, and Don Gentile became the linchpins of these missions, using experience and tactical knowledge to protect vulnerable bomber groups. German pilots initially underestimated the Americans, assuming sheer numbers would overwhelm them. But repeated engagements revealed a critical flaw in German assumptions. American fighters were not just defensive, they were proactive hunters. During the massive raids on German industrial centers, Mustangs and Thunderbolts patrolled long corridors through hostile airspace. Pilots memorized enemy flak concentrations and known Luftwaffe airfields. They learned to exploit clouds, sun position, and terrain for surprise attacks. Johnson, flying over Leipzig, famously downed multiple FW-190s by using a combination of altitude advantage and coordinated squadron tactics, striking first and vanishing before enemy formation could respond. Such precision demanded flawless timing, absolute situational awareness, and mastery of the aircraft's unique capabilities. In the Pacific, the tempo was even more relentless. Operations over the Solomon Islands and New Guinea required daily sorties, often in harsh weather, against well-trained Japanese pilots who understood local geography. Aces such as Joe Foss adapted quickly, employing hit-and-run tactics to neutralize superior numbers. In one instance near Bougainville, Foss flew a solo mission that resulted in multiple enemy kills, returning to base with minimal damage to his aircraft. These sorties demonstrated that American success relied equally on technology, pilot skill, and adaptability in unpredictable conditions. Each engagement contributed to a growing body of knowledge. Aces kept detailed logs of enemy maneuvers, effective angles of attack, and evasion techniques. These records became invaluable for training newer pilots and refining tactical doctrines. Over Europe and the Pacific, the combination of aircraft performance, tactical intelligence, and pilot ingenuity established American air superiority as a tangible, measurable advantage. Enemy pilots increasingly recognized the deadly efficiency of American aces, who could coordinate attacks at long range, anticipate enemy maneuvers, and maximize the potential of their aircraft under any circumstance. By mid-1944, the American approach to air warfare had matured. Strategic bombing campaigns were supported not just by brute force but by the precision, courage, and tactical innovation of aces. This shift marked a turning point. Individual skill was amplified by coordinated strategy, transforming aerial combat into a science of anticipation, speed, and adaptation. By late 1944, American aces had begun to redefine the very concept of aerial combat. Individual skill, while still crucial, was now amplified by experience and intimate knowledge of both enemy tactics and aircraft capabilities. Pilots like Richard Bong, Francis Gabreski, and Thomas Maguire became legends not only for their kill counts but for the audacity and precision of their solo missions. Richard Bong, flying the P-38 Lightning over the Pacific, carried out missions that seemed impossible even by veteran standards. On one sortie near New Guinea, Bong engaged a formation of Japanese fighters alone, positioning his twin engines for optimal speed and energy management. He executed high-speed deflection shots, using the unique concentration of firepower in the P-38's nose to devastating effect. Within minutes, multiple enemy aircraft were destroyed, and Bong returned with minimal damage. His actions demonstrated the importance of aircraft mastery, precise gunnery, and psychological warfare, knowing when to strike and when to disappear from the enemy's field of vision. In Europe, Gabi Gabreski often flew extended patrols over Nazi-occupied territory. His solo flights required meticulous planning, fuel consumption, safe routes over friendly territory, and timing to coincide with other squadron movements. On several occasions, Gabreski intercepted enemy fighters far from Allied lines, often engaging numerically superior groups with patience and calculation rather than brute force. German records later noted that his attacks were unpredictable, fast, and disorienting, creating fear among Luftwaffe pilots who had never encountered such aggressive, solitary adversaries. Thomas Maguire, another top ace, pushed the envelope even further. Over the Philippines, Maguire exploited the P-38's high-altitude performance to engage enemy fighters while remaining largely untouchable. His solo tactics included diving from extreme altitudes, executing split-S maneuvers to regain energy, and striking targets before the enemy could react. Maguire's sorties were meticulously logged, providing a blueprint for other pilots who needed to conduct deep penetration missions with minimal support. The solo feats were more than displays of bravery. They were a practical component of air strategy. By eliminating key enemy aircraft or drawing enemy pilots away from bomber formations, these aces protected thousands of Allied personnel. Each mission demonstrated that, Even in the vast, chaotic theater of aerial warfare, a single highly skilled pilot could shape the outcome of engagements. Over both Europe and the Pacific, American aces proved that innovation, precision, and boldness in solo combat were just as decisive as numerical or technological superiority. These missions, while risky, provided invaluable intelligence as well. Pilots returned with first-hand observations of enemy tactics, aircraft strengths, and weaknesses. This information fed into squadron training and mission planning, improving the overall effectiveness of American air operations. Solo operations illustrated that air combat was not solely a matter of massed formations but could be decisively influenced by individual ingenuity, adaptability, and courage. As the war progressed, the role of American aces evolved beyond solo engagements to strategic defense of bomber formations. The USAF's heavy bombers, such as the B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator, conducted long-range missions over Germany and the Pacific, often vulnerable to swarms of enemy fighters. Aces like Robert Johnson, John "Johnny" Smith, and Charles McDonald were assigned as fighter escorts, tasked with ensuring these missions reached their targets and returned safely. Fighter escort required a unique combination of skills. Pilots needed to anticipate enemy maneuvers, protect bombers from both head-on and flanking attacks, and coordinate with dozens of other escort fighters. A single miscalculation could result in significant bomber losses, which in turn could alter strategic bombing campaigns. Johnson, flying a P-51 Mustang over Europe, perfected the tactic of section patrols, dividing escort squadrons into small groups that could respond flexibly to sudden Luftwaffe attacks. His situational awareness allowed him to engage enemy fighters while maintaining visual contact with bomber formations, ensuring no bomber was left unprotected. In the Pacific, the challenge was different. Japanese fighters often used hit-and-run tactics, exploiting their agility and terrain knowledge. Gabreski and his squadron adapted by creating layered defense formations, alternating between aggressive interception and covering retreats. This approach minimized losses among bombers and maximized the destruction of enemy fighters, demonstrating how individual skill and tactical planning combined to achieve strategic objectives. The coordination between aces and bomber crews was also critical for morale. Bombardiers could focus on precision targeting, knowing that experienced pilots watched over them. Conversely, fighter pilots had to adjust their tactics dynamically, balancing aggressive pursuit of enemy aircraft with the primary mission of protecting the bombers. This dual responsibility demanded exceptional judgment and composure under fire. Aces recorded not only kills but also defensive victories, in which enemy aircraft were forced to disengage without achieving a kill. These contributions, often less glamorous than solo dogfights, had profound effects on the war effort. Losses were minimized, bombing campaigns achieved greater accuracy, and the psychological impact on both Allied and Axis forces was significant. Enemy pilots learned to fear the presence of American aces, even when bombers were not under immediate attack, because their reputation for tactical excellence preceded them. By late 1944, these protective missions were standard procedure. Commanders could rely on aces to enforce air superiority over target zones, allowing heavy bombers to carry out missions that directly impacted industrial and military capabilities of enemy nations. The integration of solo skill and strategic defense illustrated a broader principle. Air power was most effective when individual heroism aligned with mission objectives. American aces were not only pilots but also inventors of air combat tactics. Facing numerically superior enemy formations, they developed maneuvers that maximized their aircraft's strengths while exploiting enemy weaknesses. One of the most notable techniques was the high-side boom and zoom, perfected by pilots flying P-47 Thunderbolts. This tactic involved diving from higher altitude with maximum speed to engage enemy aircraft, then climbing back to altitude to avoid prolonged dogfights. By combining altitude advantage, speed, and firepower, aces could engage multiple adversaries in quick succession while minimizing their own exposure. Another critical innovation was the finger four formation, which replaced the traditional tight V formation. The finger four allowed two pairs of fighters to cover each other, increasing situational awareness and enabling flexible attack patterns. Pilots like Gabreski and Johnson used this formation to counter German Luftwaffe tactics in Europe, where Messerschmitt Bf-109s often attacked in waves. The formation allowed American pilots to respond rapidly to multiple threats, and many recorded kills were achieved because pairs of fighters could split to pursue different targets while still providing mutual support. In the Pacific, individual prowess often dictated survival. Japanese Zeros were highly maneuverable, and many aces, such as Richard Bong and Thomas Maguire, developed vertical tactics that relied on energy management. By climbing above the enemy and diving with speed, they could strike and escape before the enemy could react. These boom and zoom and vertical maneuvers were essential in engagements where a single misstep could lead to catastrophic losses. American pilots' focus on energy tactics contrasted sharply with the dogfighting style preferred by many Japanese aviators, emphasizing speed and positioning over turning contests. Solo engagements were a measure of skill, discipline, and mental acuity. Aces often had to make split-second decisions. Whether to pursue a fleeing enemy, return to cover a bomber formation, or coordinate with other friendly fighters. The ability to read the battlefield, anticipate maneuvers, and maintain situational awareness while firing at high speeds required extraordinary training. Pilots kept detailed combat diaries, noting the altitude, speed, and angle of engagement, which informed subsequent missions and contributed to evolving tactics. Even when outnumbered, American aces frequently turned situations to their advantage. For example, on a mission over Germany in late 1944, Robert Johnson's squadron of 4 P-51 Mustangs encountered a formation of 15 Bf-109s. Using altitude advantage, split attacks, and coordinated fire, the 4 pilots shot down 6 enemy aircraft while only sustaining minor damage to one of their own planes. Such encounters demonstrated the integration of technology, tactics, and individual skill. Aces also leveraged psychological warfare. The presence of experienced pilots could disrupt enemy morale, causing formations to break apart and retreat even before combat began. Letters from Luftwaffe pilots captured after engagements noted that American pilots fought with the precision of an entire squadron alone, acknowledging both their skill and the effectiveness of their innovative tactics. These tactical innovations ensured that American aces could protect bombers, dominate dogfights, and achieve mission objectives despite being outnumbered. The combination of solo skill, formation discipline, and energy tactics created a lethal advantage that reshaped air combat doctrine for the remainder of the war. Among the most legendary feats of American aces were missions undertaken alone or with minimal support against overwhelming enemy forces. These engagements tested the limits of human skill, machine endurance, and tactical creativity. One such instance occurred in early 1944, when Lieutenant John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group encountered a formation of 12 German FW-190s over the skies of Germany. Flying a P-51 Mustang alone after his flight was separated by cloud cover, Meyer assessed the enemy formation, calculating angles, speed, and altitude to maximize surprise. Using the boom and zoom technique, he attacked from the sun, diving onto the lead aircraft. Within seconds, the first FW-190 erupted in flames, forcing the rest to scatter. By exploiting altitude advantage and precise fire control, Meyer sequentially engaged 3 more aircraft in under 5 minutes. Though outnumbered, he avoided prolonged dogfighting and relied on speed and tactical positioning. After expending his ammunition, he disengaged, returning to friendly territory without damage. This mission exemplified how a single ace could turn numerical inferiority into tactical dominance. Across the Pacific, pilots faced similar extreme odds. Major Richard Bong, the top American ace with 40 confirmed kills, often flew solo patrols over Japanese-held islands. One mission in 1944 saw Bong engage 6 enemy Zeros with his P-38 Lightning. By maintaining altitude advantage and employing sharp diving attacks, he destroyed 2 aircraft before using energy retention to evade counterattacks. His combination of situational awareness, aircraft mastery, and mental calculation enabled him to survive encounters that would have overwhelmed average pilots. Thomas Maguire, Bong's comrade, demonstrated similar daring. In late 1944, Maguire intercepted a formation of Japanese fighters threatening American bombers. Flying against odds of at least 3:1, he executed rapid climbs and controlled dives, targeting high-priority enemy aircraft while evading return fire. McGuire personally downed 5 enemy planes in a single engagement, saving the bomber formation and exemplifying the principle of calculated aggression. These solo engagements revealed the importance of individual judgment, instantaneous decision-making, and mastery of one's aircraft. Pilots relied not only on mechanical performance but also on their ability to predict enemy behavior. Battle reports emphasize that successful aces demonstrated a mental flexibility unmatched by standard training, allowing them to improvise in rapidly changing combat scenarios. Aces often combined intelligence and psychological pressure. By creating the impression of superior numbers or acting unpredictably, they could disrupt enemy formations. Reports from captured enemy pilots highlight that encountering a single American Mustang or Lightning could induce panic, breaking cohesion and reducing enemy effectiveness before physical confrontation even began. American solo tactics left a legacy on fighter doctrine. Post-war analyses credited these missions with demonstrating how a small, highly skilled force could achieve results disproportionate to numbers. The integration of energy tactics, surprise, and aggressive decision-making became foundational for modern air combat training and strategic doctrine. Not all feats of American aces relied solely on numbers or aircraft performance. Many were defined by rapid improvisation and inventive tactics. During the air campaign over Europe in 1944, pilots of the 357th Fighter Group frequently faced Luftwaffe formations that used superior aircraft numbers to their advantage. Aces like Chuck Yeager and Bud Anderson adapted quickly to these pressures by altering standard engagement protocols. Yeager, flying a P-51 Mustang during the mission over Merseburg in March 1944, encountered an FW-190 formation attempting to ambush Allied bombers. Outnumbered 5-1, Yeager utilized terrain-following flight, weaving through valleys and treelines to avoid detection. His rapid improvisation created confusion in the enemy formation, allowing him to engage selectively and destroy 2 aircraft before reinforcements arrived. This style, adapting moment to moment using environmental factors, became a hallmark of American aerial strategy. Across the Pacific, pilots faced entirely different challenges but demonstrated the same ingenuity. The dense island topography and unpredictable weather required instant decisions. Lieutenant Colonel David Tex Hill, commanding P-40 Warhawks during the Solomon Islands campaign, often experimented with low-altitude attack runs, combining dive and climb maneuvers with improvised radio signaling to coordinate with other pilots. His approach allowed small groups to neutralize Japanese airfields and supply convoys despite limited numbers. The capacity for improvisation extended to mechanical ingenuity as well. Aces frequently modified their aircraft in the field. Propeller pitch adjustments, additional armor plating, and customized ammunition loads were employed based on first-hand combat experience. Reports from the Pacific Theater reveal that pilots like Richard Bong adjusted fuel distribution and engine timing on P-38 Lightnings to extend range and improve performance during long solo patrols. These adaptations were not officially mandated but emerged from practical necessity and intimate understanding of one's aircraft. Training manuals later cited these examples as critical lessons. The ability to improvise in real time, to manipulate speed, altitude, and attack angles in ways that rigid doctrine could not anticipate, became an essential quality for aspiring aces. Observers noted that the most successful pilots were those who could make instantaneous decisions and recalibrate tactics after every enemy move, turning potential vulnerabilities into opportunities. Psychological strategy was also part of improvisation. Aces used feints, deceptive maneuvers, and unexpected attack vectors to exploit enemy caution. Flying alone or in small formations, they created the impression of greater strength or disoriented opposing forces, multiplying the effect of limited numbers. Intelligence reports confirm that German and Japanese pilots often misjudged the number and position of American aircraft due to such tactics, contributing to mission success without additional resources. By blending rapid improvisation, environmental awareness, and technical understanding of their aircraft, American aces converted challenging scenarios into opportunities. These moments, meticulously recorded in combat reports, illustrate that beyond raw skill, the hallmark of an ace was the capacity to innovate under pressure, a lesson that continues to inform modern fighter training. By the end of World War II, the feats of American aces had become a blueprint for modern aerial combat. Pilots who had flown solo missions across hostile skies in both Europe and the Pacific left behind not only records of enemy aircraft destroyed, but an enduring methodology for integrating skill, technology, and improvisation. Richard Bong, Gregory Boyington, Chuck Yeager, Bud Anderson, David Tex Hill, and dozens of others demonstrated the full spectrum of what it meant to be an ace. Their experiences showed that mastery extended beyond superior reflexes or accurate marksmanship. Success depended on anticipation, situational awareness, and the ability to innovate when standard tactics failed. Each engagement contributed to a growing repository of tactical knowledge, later codified into manuals that shaped post-war fighter doctrine. In Europe, the lessons were clear. Solo or small group engagements could achieve disproportionate results when pilots leveraged terrain, radio coordination, and unpredictable attack vectors. The P-51 Mustang, often seen as the most iconic American fighter of the war, served as a platform that enabled aces to maximize their personal tactics. Missions over Germany and occupied France repeatedly illustrated that superior planning combined with spontaneous action could overcome numerical disadvantages. In the Pacific, the challenges were different but equally instructive. Island-hopping campaigns required pilots to adapt to short runways, dense terrain, and unpredictable weather. The P-38 Lightning and P-40 Warhawk became instruments for improvisation, allowing aces to experiment with dive patterns, low-altitude strafing, and unconventional approaches. Combat reports highlighted the strategic value of individual initiative, showing that a single skilled pilot could influence the outcome of larger battles. These experiences directly informed the development of modern fighter training programs. The United States Air Force adopted many principles of ACES tactics. Emphasis on situational awareness, the importance of flexibility in the air, and training pilots to assess enemy behavior and improvise accordingly. Modern flight simulators, tactical exercises, and even drone operations continue to draw lessons from the improvisational methods of World War II aces. The psychological legacy is also significant. The confidence, decisiveness, and independent judgment cultivated by American aces became part of the cultural fabric of the Air Force. Historical studies indicate that pilots trained to think dynamically, to anticipate and adapt, were more likely to survive high-risk missions and achieve mission objectives, a principle validated in conflicts from Korea to the Gulf Wars. Moreover, the technical ingenuity of aces, modifying aircraft in field, optimizing engines, adjusting weapon systems, highlighted the importance of pilot-driven innovation. Modern combat aviation encourages a similar mindset. Operators are trained not just to fly, but to understand and adapt the capabilities of their aircraft in real time. The combined lessons of skill, improvisation, and technology created a legacy beyond individual heroism. American aces reshaped the understanding of air superiority, demonstrating that agility, intelligence, and innovation could outweigh raw numbers or firepower. The records they set, kilometers flown alone over enemy territory, dozens of aircraft destroyed, critical missions completed under extreme conditions, are celebrated not only for their bravery, but for the strategic insights they provided. In conclusion, the incredible feats of American aces over Europe and the Pacific established enduring principles of aerial warfare. Solo missions, innovative tactics, and rapid improvisation became the foundation of modern fighter doctrine. The lessons from these pilots continue to influence military aviation, proving that mastery in the skies is as much about adaptability and intelligence as it is about firepower or technology.